You lace up a pair of sneakers without thinking about it. Cushioned soles, arch support, a thick layer of rubber between your feet and the ground. For most of human history, none of that existed. Your ancestors walked, ran, and hunted across rocks, thorns, ice, and burning sand with nothing between their skin and the earth but skin. How did that actually work? The answer is that the human foot itself became the equipment, and it took an enormous amount of time and damage to get there. Start with what bare feet are actually up against: sharp rock edges that can slice skin open, thorns and splinters that work their way in and don't come out easily, ground that swings between freezing at night and scorching by midday, and parasites, hookworm larvae, still a major global health problem today, infect people specifically by burrowing directly through the skin of bare feet standing in contaminated soil. Walking barefoot wasn't a neutral default. It was a constant, low-grade risk that never fully went away. The body's answer to that risk was built in layers. The soles of your feet have some of the thickest skin anywhere on your body, and that skin thickens further, growing tougher calluses in direct response to repeated contact with rough ground. Underneath that skin sits a specialized pad of fat, unlike fat almost anywhere else in the body, structured specifically to absorb repeated impact without breaking down. And underneath that, the arch of the foot itself works less like a static support and more like a spring, storing and releasing energy with every single step. None of this was decoration. It was survival infrastructure, refined across an enormous stretch of time before anyone ever tied a piece of leather around their foot. The biological anthropologist Eric Trinkaus spent years studying something unexpected in the fossil record: the toe bones of ancient humans. Trinkaus and his colleagues found that starting sometime in the Upper Paleolithic, tens of thousands of years ago, the smaller toe bones in some human populations became noticeably less robust, less thick, and less reinforced than in populations before them. His argument is that this change makes sense if something started supporting and protecting the foot from the outside, reducing the mechanical demand placed directly on the toes themselves. In other words, the bones in ancient feet may be telling us that some form of footwear existed tens of thousands of years before we have a single actual shoe to look at. And for a long time, that's all we had: bones implying something with no physical object to confirm it. The earliest footwear that has actually survived is far younger than that. In a cave in Oregon called Fort Rock, archaeologists found sandals woven from sagebrush bark. Radiocarbon dated to roughly 10,000 years old. In a cave in Armenia called Arini 1, researchers found a single leather moccasin stuffed with grass, preserved by the cave's cool, dry conditions for around 5,500 years, one of the oldest known leather shoes on the planet. Both are remarkable objects. Both are also almost certainly not the beginning of the story, just the earliest pieces of it that happened to survive. Between those first hints in the toe bones and those first surviving objects lies a stretch of tens of thousands of years where humans were, by any reasonable estimate, mostly barefoot. And barefoot, it turns out, was not simply a worse version of wearing shoes, it shaped how the body actually moved. The biomechanist Daniel Lieberman has studied exactly this question by comparing habitually barefoot runners to runners who grew up in cushioned shoes. His research found a clear pattern. People who run barefoot tend to land on the middle or the front of the foot, letting the arch and the calf muscles absorb the shock of impact. People who run in thick cushioned shoes tend to land heel first instead, a strike pattern that barefoot runners mostly avoid because without cushioning, it hurts. Modern shoes didn't just protect the foot, they quietly changed the way an entire species moves. That barefoot gait wasn't incidental either. It connects directly to one of the most demanding things early humans may have done: persistent hunting, tracking prey animals for hours across open ground under a hot sun until the animal collapsed from exhaustion. That strategy required feet that could handle enormous repeated mileage across variable terrain without shoes, without cushioning, without support for hours at a stretch, day after day. None of this means bare feet were painless or safe. Foot injuries in a world without antibiotics could be genuinely dangerous. A deep cut or puncture wound could become infected An infection, before modern medicine, could escalate quickly into something life-threatening. Every thorn, every sharp rock, every parasite in the soil was a real and recurring cost, not a minor inconvenience. Surviving on bare feet meant tolerating that risk for an almost unimaginable number of years, generation after generation, because there was no alternative yet. Eventually, footwear changed the calculation. Wrapped feet meant fewer punctures, fewer parasites, and the ability to cross terrain, ice fields, sharp scree, frozen ground, that bare feet alone made brutally difficult. Some researchers connect the eventual, gradual softening of toe bone robusticity in the fossil record directly to this shift. Once footwear started absorbing some of the mechanical stress, the bone simply didn't need to be built as heavily anymore. The story doesn't fully end there either. The rise of thick, heavily cushioned modern shoes has created a new version of an old debate. Lieberman's research and others in the field have raised real questions about whether extremely cushioned, heavily supported footwear has allowed foot muscles to weaken over a lifetime in ways that a barefoot or minimally shod childhood would not. The barefoot and minimalist shoe movement of the last 2 decades is, in a strange way, an attempt to reintroduce a stress that the human foot spent millions of years being built to handle. So the next time you slide on a pair of shoes without a second thought, you're relying on something that took your ancestors an extraordinary length of time to even partially solve. Long before Fort Rock's woven sandals, long before the Arini 1 moccasin, there were tens of thousands of years of bare feet meeting rock, ice, thorn, and parasite directly, with nothing to answer that contact except thicker skin, a shock-absorbing pad of fat, and an arch built like a spring. Your feet still carry pieces of that history, whether you notice them or not. The callus that forms on your heel after a summer of sandals, the ache in your arch after a long day standing. Underneath the cushioning and the rubber, you are still standing on the same basic design that carried a species across an entire planet with nothing else to protect it. If this video meant something to you, subscribe. There's more where this came from. I'll see you in the next one. Bye.